I'd like to call to order the October 7th, 2020 State Board of Education meeting. Roll call, please.
Mr. Wilson.
Present.
Mr. Durham.
Present.
Dr. Ernest.
Here.
Dr. Freitas.
He's here.
Mr. Gassner.
Here.
Mr. Mapes.
Here.
Superintendent McCormick.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Moe.
Here.
Ms. Rensselaer.
Here.
Mr. Watt.
Here.
We have four.
Thank you. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you and welcome. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the September 2nd, 2020 meeting?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. Statement of the chair. I do want to, and I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but our schools deserve to recognize for the fact that they've gone above and beyond here with the start of the school year. I believe we have over 97% of our schools have an in-person option, which I'm certain puts us at the top of school districts around the country, and that's impressive. And most of those also offer a virtual option for students that aren't comfortable. So again, we cannot say job well done enough. We understand what you're going through, and we are trying to be as helpful as we can. On that same note, Paul Neidig and the IHSAA again it is good to see those student athletes getting the opportunity and the work it takes to ensure that those student athletes get the opportunity to come out and perform and enjoy doing the things that they do. That's an important part of the education process as well, so I'm glad that we continue to work towards that. And last but certainly not least, it is not a welcome, but Erica, this is her first in-person meeting, so it is an additional welcome. It's nice to be in person and see everyone. And that is the only comments that I have. Are there board member comments? Yes, sir.
BJ, I would just encourage my fellow board members, if you have not, I know some of you have, to register for the NASB annual conference. Really good, timely topics on there. And I think we did a great job of coming up with what I would call one of the best platforms out there to do this on. So it's going to be some great stuff. And so for those that haven't, you don't have to travel. You can sit wherever you want to and go through it at whatever sessions you want and those kinds of things. So pretty cost-effective way for some great professional growth.
I would echo that. I mean, I gather every time I come back from a NASB conference, I feel that I've learned something. I think there would be some value, Byron, maybe in us having some type of a WebEx or something maybe after that while it's fresh in our minds as a group, to just have a conversation, kind of digest through the things that we've just heard and discussed.
Sure.
So maybe we can set something like that up.
Great idea.
Anything else under board member comments? Public comment, I believe we have one.
Mr. John O'Neill from VISTA.
And would just ask everybody who comes up to the public mic today, if you could refrain from touching the microphone. We do have wipes to wipe down the microphone and the clicker, but if everybody could refrain from touching the microphone.
Okay. Welcome.
Well, hello. Thank you, Chairman, committee members. John O'Neill with the Indiana State Teachers Association. It's my first time, I believe, in a public meeting since March, so it's good to see you all, hence my quarantine look if you don't recognize me. I just want to make a brief statement today about the waiver applications before you today. I don't have any specific comments as to the particular district requests. It's more of a general comment in support of the concept of this flexibility proposed to you today. The transition back to school, of course, as you all know, and everyone across the state knows, during this pandemic has created an entirely new set of challenges with respect to educators' workload, time management, and responsibilities. And while health and safety precautions are necessary and important, as we all agree, school employees are overly burdened juggling both in-person and virtual instruction, oftentimes simultaneously, requiring educators to work added hours each week with less time for planning, less peer support, and no increase in compensation. Additionally, educators daily are faced with uncertainties as whether their school might be shut down, whether they may have to be quarantined or their students quarantined, and whether students can actually even attend class. We have found through conversations with our members that morale is low, stress is high, mental health concerns are increasing, and many school employees are rightly worried about their health and safety during this situation. Even before COVID-19, Indiana had a teacher shortage, and these factors have compounded the profession's already tenuous future. ISTA members are acutely aware that the current circumstances required a fluid, adaptive response and solution from everyone, frankly. They continue to answer the call, as they always do, but these heroic efforts are unsustainable. The state board is now being asked in a similar measure to respond in a fluid and adaptive manner. And while greater flexibility is not in itself a one-stop fix, it is a significant tool through which schools can now solve problems that arise essentially when it falls to school staff to navigate the waters on these issues. So ISTA urges the board to continue considering these flexibility requests when those measures are linked to instructional time and workloads. ISTA also supports that some of these measures be considered on a statewide basis. For example, a temporary loosening of the teacher training requirements and other similar mandates that we have seen over the past few years. The association hopes to work together with the board as we see more of these requests develop. As I said, we continue to hear from our members about these ongoing challenges. We do acknowledge that legislative and or executive action may need to also be considered as we enter the upcoming legislative session. And in those cases, any help from the board is extremely helpful. So in closing, ISTA believes that we need to use all the tools we have available to maintain quality student learning conditions, and also balancing that against teacher working conditions, and take the steps that we need to do to decrease turnover, as I'm sure all of you have seen certain data points on those increases. So again, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for the work you do, and thank you for considering these waivers, and I imagine you'll be hearing from us down the road as well.
Thank you. I want some public comment. Thank
I
you,
don't
sir.
think I touched anything, just for the record.
Okay. We move on to best practices and Heartland Career Center. Byron, do you want to welcome our guest?
Well, I would love to. So this really, it's great that we're back in person, and pretty excited when you see the large group of students. I forgot to count them this morning, but to use an ag term, there's quite the gaggle over there, and might outnumber the rest of the crew here. But this really started 2 or 3 weeks ago. I had the opportunity to go up and spend the morning, one morning session with all of the students. And so some of these students are good friends of mine now, and we've had the chance to work together. They taught me how to fly a drone, and yes, anyone can do it. I thought I might be the first to crash, but did not. But this program has been, we're still in the pilot stages of it, but has been quite the labor of love with agriculture, if you will, in a couple of years coming. And I've had the opportunity to be in several of those meetings and really appreciate that opportunity. But I talk a lot about, and I think that it's so important that we have business and industry involved in our planning. And sometimes we say that, but we don't really do it. And I think this is a perfect example, and why I think this is such a best practice of that's happening. This really is work that's at the intersection of business and academia, and we need to acknowledge the amount of expertise that's come together and been brought together to pull this off and to be a great experience for our students. You're going to hear about 3 certifications that, if they don't tell you, I'm going to at the end, that they're able to get when they're done with this program, and I know they're looking for even more. We've got a representative from a partner business here this morning, and that happens to be a business that I got to be with the day that I was up there and experience what the students get. So with that, I really do believe this is a best practice for us to look at how we can do this right, and really how we can make that intersection come together between business and industry and that. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to either Mark Hobbs from Heartland Career Center. 9 schools feed into this career center, or Lori Du Bois, who teaches the program and was instrumental in the planning. I'm not sure who's going first. I forgot to ask that, but you all just take over, and so glad that you all are here.
Thank you. We'll start with the video.
Okay?
The purpose of using drones is to get maps like this. This is a map that measures chlorophyll content. Soil testing 101.
This is a drilling auger. This is a collector go above that helps make the soil testing process a lot easier.
So how we soil test is we drill 6 inches into the ground. Make sure we get all layers of the soil. This is some really good soil with some high organic matter and lots of nutrients. So after soil testing, you get a soil test report, and this is going to be your organic matter percentage. And then you also got to remember NPK, which stands for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The weather station component or
USDM weather station also has sensors that can monitor soil moisture and allow us to recognize if we need to water the soil or irrigate.
It's an honor to be here today. Thanks, Dr. Ernst, for that warm introduction. We are a precision agriculture program, and this is a brand-new test pilot program at Heartland Career Center located in Wabash, Indiana. And as you noticed from the video, that kind of gave you an introduction of, like, we kind of try to condense what the program's all about. It's exciting to be part of a new, innovative program that's not taught anywhere. I called everywhere across the U.S. trying to look for a similar program where I could steal their curriculum and found none. So we started from ground zero on trying to figure out what's the best way to put together a precision ag program. And I'm spoiled with, they have God-given talents, and they have such a passion for agriculture as the students that enrolled in my class this year as a first year. We're fortunate to receive a next level program of study grant, thanks to Tony Harrell and their team at the CTE level, and that was very instrumental in getting our program started. And just like with precision agriculture, like you showed in the video, we accommodate to each individual plant, and I try to accommodate to each individual student in the program. Agriculture is a large field, no pun intended, and each student has a particular passion that they're interested in. And so and I knew this was going to be a challenge putting this program together, teaching a 3-hour course every single day. You have to have the hands-on activities and integrate that into your curriculum. So I knew that was going to be a challenge, and so my thought was visiting business and industries that have partnered with us. We've had extreme, overwhelming support from the ag community, and we have went over over 20 different field trips or guest speakers come in. They are learning firsthand, seeing, experiencing what those business and industries looking for in their skills, and not only that, but we're seeing the latest and greatest technology, and we're also learning their problems, and then they become more innovative. They become problem solvers and trying to take agriculture to the next level, which is extremely exciting to see. At the same time, we're creating probably one of the most important aspects, being a new program, we're creating internship spots at those locations of businesses. So they're partnering with us to become an internship location. The students are excited to be here. They are going to come up and share a little bit more about the experiences we've had thus far with business industries. It takes a lot of phone calls, a lot of trying to correlate everybody's schedule, but you'll see how they've learned from their experiences.
Welcome.
Morning. I just want to thank you guys for allowing us to be here. I'm going to talk about the SEAL program that we're involved in. We're very, very thankful for you guys allowing us to be in that. The SEAL program will allow us to have greater opportunities for internships that the students can get. The SEAL program also provides industry recognized certifications. One of those is a drone license that we can get our junior year. Another one is the applicator's license for spraying. You can get that your senior year once you turn 18. And then the third one is a Class A CDL. And you can also get that your senior year. Thank you.
Morning.
Good morning. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is Next Level Grant, just like what Mr. Boyes was discussing. It was a grant that was given to start the program, which most of you already know. And we were 1 out of 12 that were chosen. We're very grateful. And we would just like to thank each and one of you for this grant. So the next, I'm going to talk about Vincennes University and how we are involved with them. We are enrolled in their early college program, and that is a college program for high schoolers that you can earn college credits while you are learning getting your high school credits also. And this is a 18 college credit a year class, so 36 total if you take it both years. And that is the iPads that were granted to us from Vincennes for being enrolled in their early college program. We received 10 of them. So, yeah, and we are very thankful for that and the opportunity.
Absolutely.
This is Eric Eller. He is a precision ag specialist and CEO of Forefront Ag Solutions. He has been working directly with us to help develop the curriculum and teach us about data analytics softwares and all the technology components.
Bex Hybrids came to Heartland, spoke with us, and showed us applications such as Farm Server, an online software for field analysis, and their fleet of drones, including their Helios spray drone.
This is White's hydroponic school. They showed us hydroponic greenhouses that grow food for their residents in an environmentally friendly way. Producing food this way compared to traditional farming showed us the future of agriculture in an energy efficient way.
We went to Bowman Farms. They have 1.8 million bushels of grain storage. We learned all about how to store grain and the markets and why you store grain, the markets to get a better price.
We also invited John Deere out to show us their RTK program and how it worked. Bowman's also showed us how it has affected them as a farm and how it has benefited them. And with the big equipment, it's hard to get around waterways. So now you can just drive right through it and it'll shut off when you reach a waterway.
We learned about a variety of careers at Straussville Feeds. Some of the things we learned are that they do blood work on every calf each week to ensure that they are disease-free and healthy. Straussville Feeds makes a milk powder that is shipped to surrounding states, and Strauss has several barns where all calves are closely cared for.
We are very fortunate to have a great partnership with AgVenture McKillop Seeds, and they've got a few operations going, but one of the main ones we've really focused on is their seed corn operation. A few things we learned, while sorting corn, we learned some of the diseases that can affect seed corn. We also learned the difference between a conventional dryer and a seed corn dryer, and the seed corn dryer actually dries whole ears while your conventional dryers are going to dry single kernel, and that's one of the things we learned there.
After learning about a specialty berry farm, we laid irrigation line for some of the rows that needed replaced. We also went to McKillop's tomato field to see how their tomato harvester works. After talking to them about the whole operation, we talked about the sensors on the harvester that picks up only the red, ripe tomatoes and leaves behind the bad ones or green ones.
We've had the opportunity in this class to get a hold of and fly 2 drones. One of them is the Phantom 4 Pro and the other is the Mavic 2. Both of them are made by DJI. Dr. Ernest came to one of our field trips and I taught him how to fly the drone in about 5 minutes.
Was he good at it?
That's where I'm getting to. Okay. I gave his pilot skills about a 7.5 out of 10. Some of us are still lucky to have our heads.
This year, we will all have the opportunity to earn our Drone Part 107 license. By earning this, I will have the opportunity to go on internship next year for Haldeman Farm Management and be able to fly farms and map farms for them. We all also have the opportunity as seniors to earn our CDL license and chemical applicator's license.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Mitch Schneider. I'm with Ag Venture McKillop Seeds in Wabash, Indiana, and I was asked to come here as an industry representative to talk with you about this program and what we've witnessed. I'm also speaking to you as a parent of one of the students. I'm a manager and a 4th generation partner in a farm, and we also have a retail seed business there in Wabash. We produce hybrid seed corn that we process, bag, and sell directly to farmers throughout the state. Soybean seed, seed wheat, and then we also produce commercial corn and processing tomatoes that are sold to Red Gold. A little bit about us: we have 19 full-time employees and up to 30 seasonal employees. We have all kinds of positions available at our farm, direct sellers of retail of our seed products. We have a lot of technical positions that we need. We need operators. They mentioned CDLs. We have a lot of truck drivers on the road getting those products to market, the seed to the farms. We also need those spray applicators, those licensed pesticide and fertility applicators. We have need for high-tech equipment operators in our seed plants when we're conditioning that seed to make sure it's of good quality as we sell that. We need general labor and managers. One of the things that I find we're requiring more and more skills from our employees all the time. It's not just show up and drive a tractor anymore. We need, as we integrate a lot of this higher technology equipment, we need more trained, more educated applicators and operators. With that, we also demand a lot more from our suppliers, whether that's suppliers or consultants that we use when we buy that equipment, genetics, the GPS, and precision agriculture services we buy. They mentioned grain marketing. We rely on those folks to make sure that we can get advice to get the most out of that bushel or ton of product that we produce. Financials, supporters and lenders, law, IT, agronomy, and et cetera. As you look at hiring a workforce, and the further you get away from, as your operation grows, the further you get away from family operators and family members, you look for certain things. And I think when you talk to ag people and ag people in general, they would tell you they want farm kids. They want farm kids to come work for them because those kids grew up on a farm. They understand what it takes to produce a bushel of corn, to feed the cattle, feed the pigs, milk a cow. The problem is we don't have enough. We don't have enough kids growing up on the farm. So that's where I think this program is really working, is it's giving these kids this firsthand exposure, firsthand experience. It's teaching them these basic skills, whether it's soil testing, analytics, all these things. And it's giving them exposure to what's all out there and what's possible in agriculture. Agriculture's big business in Indiana. And I commend this program. I think that is really working. If we lose out on these kids, if they're not exposed to agriculture and they take another trade, or they go to a college and select a major and it's not in agriculture, we've lost out. I think if you ask anyone in agriculture that's hiring and managing people, that's their biggest challenge. It's not easy anymore. It's a complex business. It's so complex with everything that goes into helping that producer raise his yield, raise his revenue, become more efficient, lower his cost of production, and do it in an environmentally responsible way. So that's what I think is working. I had the pleasure of listening to some of the excitement of a couple of these boys, and they're wanting an internship, and they said, we can fly drones and we can make maps and we can do all these things. And I said, that's all great. I love those maps. But what are you going to do for either our farm, or what are you going to do for our customer's farm when you fly that? How are we going to pinpoint where there's a problem in that production field? How are we going to go out there and we're going to identify what the problem is? How are we going to help them manage or create a strategy that's going to help them grow more bushels, or to fix a disease, or fix a fertility problem? So that's the challenge, and I've heard that back from the instructors when we're in the field on a field trip. Okay, how do you use this? What are you going to do to help a grower or a producer be more profitable, raise more bushels, raise more tons, or be more efficient? Because that's what it comes down to. I just saw some real passion as well. They had an open house, and I basically had to drag my son to it. I said, I want to go see what's going on. So we went there, and there was four boys and their parents there. They pulled out that drone, and then they started setting up their flight map, showed us what they were doing. Before we knew it, the open house was over 40 minutes ago. It's 8:40. We had to shut them down. So I've not experienced that as a parent. So I think there's a lot of passion here. The bottom line is, there's a great need for more talent and a bigger candidate pool as we become more sophisticated in agriculture. And it's just, we're not getting enough kids exposed to agriculture. We need this program to help us do that.
As an industry partner, I commend you for not only being a consumer of talent, but helping also to produce it. So all of your partners, 2 thumbs up. I mean, that's what it's going to take, are those industry partners partnering with K-12 education to produce what you see standing here in front of you. So,
yep. And I think agriculture, I know agriculture is hungry for that, because that's our biggest limiting factor is attracting talent, attracting youth. Some of us don't want to work forever, so we need that succession plan.
Well, kudos to you for being a part of the solution.
We thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Any questions or comments by board members?
How many of the students do not live on farms or don't currently farm?
I like that.
That's great.
That is
Thank
good.
you.
How many of you guys as fathers do not full-time farm? Like, who full-time farms? Who full-time?
So post-high school, how many of you plan to stick with it? Like good.
Wow, good.
Yeah, that's great. And who's the son?
Okay.
So is there a career that you guys were introduced to through some of your visits that you didn't know about that now one of you is thinking about pursuing? Which is going to require one of you to be brave and talk on the microphone again.
I like it.
Before I heard about the class, I had no idea what I was going to do in college. Then after I heard about the whole precision ag thing, I was like, wow, I really want to do this. And then I learned that Purdue was making a class for it, a major for it. So I decided that that's what I wanted to do.
Great.
Good. Byron?
Oh, wait.
Oh, I apologize.
We got another
Go.
answer there.
I'm sorry.
I always worked in the tractor. I always was the one to go out and work dirt. It never bothered me about the soil, and then I found agronomy, and that's something I wanted to go into further down the road.
Fire?
I think, again, I hope you all are as impressed as I've been with this. And these students are, we've made with this program schoolwork look like real work. And that's what it really ought to be about. And then I think the other thing is, how impressive is it that a question is asked by my fellow board person down on the end, and two of these students pop up to the microphone, and the job that they've done interacting with adults. I can tell you, while you only give me a 7.5 out of 10 on flying the drone, I give you a 10 out of 10 on interacting with adults and doing a better job than a lot of adults that we have go up to that podium at times. And I mean that. And so I'm impressed with what you've done, and that's because of this program and the way that the students have been involved. If you heard, they're able to talk to you about the intimate details of the program. How often do we get that with students, right? They're told what they're going to do as opposed to be a part of the interaction. And so I love the fact that the students have been involved, the industry's been involved, and I also want to, he's such a great leader because he deflects to everyone else, but I want to make sure and point out Mark Hobbs, who is somewhere back there. This would never have happened without Mark's tenacity on every time there was a obstacle or something, he was able to knock it down. They were able to find money and the grants and things, and Mark was really instrumental in being so adamant about bringing the business and industry around. And that's not to take anything away from Lori or the industry piece of this, but Mark was really instrumental, and I want to make sure, since he's back there, he won't even come out and let us see him, but he was very, very instrumental in getting the grants and things, and I think that should be recognized, and so glad you all came down for a best practice, because this truly is a best practice that other people ought to learn how to pull this off together. So thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. Job well done.
I just had one quick comment.
Absolutely.
That, when you ask about some of this exposure, there's things on that video that I've been in agriculture all my life that I've not been exposed to. In my job, I've traveled around the country to talk to people about seed corn production. They may be growers of corn, but they had no idea how seed corn was produced in Delaware and in Mississippi, those kind of places. And these kids are seeing this firsthand, so the variety and the scope and the broad scope of what they're exposed to is tremendous.
Absolutely. Anything else? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Moving on to consent agenda, we have latchkey waivers, common school fund applications, 2020-2021 updated assessment windows, placement of the 2019 and 20 A to F letter grades, SBOE, National Association of State Boards of Education delegate, and IDOE accommodations guidance. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered. New business, HEA 1003, flexibility waivers.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to see everybody here in person again. So this morning we have 5 separate HEA 1003 flexibility waivers coming in front of the board. Those 5 waivers were submitted on behalf of 14 different school corporations. So if I might, I think I'll go through kind of the waivers like the waiver process generally, since this is a brand new waiver for the board, and then we'll take each individual application, each one of the 5 individual applications separately, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So again, this is a new waiver available to schools as a result of HEA 1003, which is passed during the 2020 legislative session. The purpose is to provide schools with flexibility by waiving compliance with requirements that are set forth in Indiana law in order to improve student performance and outcomes, improve efficiency of school operations, promote innovative approaches to learning, and to advance the mission or the purpose of a school. Schools are required to apply, and every application that's submitted must meet a set of statutory requirements. All flexibility requests that have been submitted to the board today were required to be approved by the school boards on whose behalf they were submitted. And it's important to note that the board has discretion when looking at these waivers, but it's only statutorily authorized to grant requests if the application met the statutory requirements that are put forward. Under the new law, once the waivers are approved by the board is required to periodically review compliance with the waivers, and ultimately the board has the authority to amend, suspend, or revoke any waivers that have been approved in the past. All of this is to say that finally on November 1st, starting this year, the board will be required to submit annual reports to the Indiana General Assembly on the waivers that have been approved and requested, all for their benefit to look at statutory overhaul and flexibility generally on which statutes they may be able to repeal or amend. So I'm happy to report that, so with the department's help, schools were able to begin submitting waiver requests on July 1st. The department built out in the accountability portal a submission portal for these waiver requests, and so that's how they all come in. And to date, so we've received 5 waiver requests, and those are on behalf of 14 separate schools. For the duration of this school year in particular, requests that come in for these waivers will be brought to the board as they're received. I know in future years the plan is to create a submission window, but due to COVID and some of the flexibility that schools need around dealing with COVID, we thought it was important to ensure that schools were able to take care of things, at home first, and then if a waiver was appropriate, come to the board. So we didn't want to foreclose that possibility by setting a strict window this particular school year. This being the first time the board has considered any of these waivers, my approach with the recommendations was to cast a reasonably wide net and in general recommend approving things that were statutorily permissible. The reason for that is as the board decides what it's comfortable granting, we'll adjust recommendations appropriately as we kind of learn the expectations. But that was kind of the philosophy behind the initial set of recommendations that's in front of you today. And then there's a couple things that are important to remember with respect to these waivers in particular. All of them were made in the context of COVID, and so that's why schools are requesting the flexibility. Every single request in front of you today was a one-year request only. So any waiver that's granted today will expire on June 30th, 2021. The waivers are not automatically renewed, and they're applicable only to the schools listed in the application that was submitted to the board. So in front of you, you should see the 5 separate waiver requests. Each one of those requests will include a staff memo for myself, and that will include recommendations. It should also include the actual application that was submitted by the schools and the rationale given for why they need the waiver. And then it should include a copy of the resolution that was adopted by the school corp's governing body. So I'll take any questions about kind of the waivers generally, and if there are no questions, we can just hop right into the first waiver.
It's interesting, you just made a comment about COVID. I mean, this legislation was proposed before COVID, right? And so our reason to grant the waivers would be to focus on academics and so forth. But I mean, I find it interesting, you just said they're all because of COVID. I mean, we're not, the rationale behind the legislation was not because of COVID. I guess I'm trying
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. That's a good point. So the rationale was not COVID. Obviously, that was unforeseen. But the requests that were submitted, part of the rationale included in every single one of the school corporation's requests was a need for flexibility, in particular due to COVID. And so that's why the requests that came in front of the board today are for 1 year only. So in the future, you can imagine a flexibility request as part of a larger comprehensive plan that a school district has for flexibility to move to competency-based education, something like that. And a waiver in that scenario would be potentially granted for a longer period of time. And that's where the compliance checks come in, where we'll not only check compliance, but we'll measure various metrics included in that way. If the board needs to, it can, like I said, amend, suspend, or revoke a particular waiver. So COVID is only relevant to the extent that that's why, or that was one of the reasons that the schools listed for requesting this set of particular flexibilities.
Any other general questions before we get into the 5 of these? Okay, we'll start with number 1, West Lafayette.
Yep. So the first request was submitted on behalf of West Lafayette Community School Corporation. The statute that they've asked the board to waive is IC 2036, which pertains to high ability students. The recommendation in this case is that the request be denied. This is one of the statutes that is not statutorily permissible to waive. So that's pretty cut and dry. That's the only thing that they've requested be waived, and it can't be waived.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve staff recommendation for the West Lafayette request for waiver.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Pat, yours was to do what? I'm sorry. To
Approve staff recommendation.
Okay.
Which is
okay,
to deny.
sorry. Got it.
I'll second the
Okay.
Any
Motion to
questions
deny.
by board members? We have a motion and a second.
I do have a question. You said this is a code that cannot be waived.
That's correct.
How would they know which could be waived and which couldn't?
So we're working on guidance that we'll hopefully have to the board here shortly, in the next month to get out. But it's in the statute, and in this particular case, I actually spoke with West Lafayette, so they were aware of the fact this could not be waived. However, like I said, because there is a reporting requirement here, some schools may choose to submit a waiver that they know can't be approved by the board for purposes of having that code section included maybe in the report that's ultimately sent to the General Assembly. So
Okay.
speculation on why they ultimately submitted it, but that I think is one.
So they knew it would get denied.
In this case, yes, West Lafayette did
Got
know
it.
this
Got it.
waiver was going to be denied.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Ms. DeLosa?
Yes.
Mr. Durham?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas? Yes. Thank you. Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Mapes?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Moat?
Yes.
Ms. Rensselaer?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Staff recommendation approved, 11-0. Thank you.
Number 2 is a joint submission.
Second waiver in front of you is a joint submission from Brown County School Corporation. I'll walk through it very briefly. You have the information in front of you. And then I know that Dr. Hammock from Brown County School Corporation is here, and she'd like to speak on the waiver before the board takes an action. Brown County submitted a waiver on behalf of itself and 8 other school corporations. They include Charles A. Beard Memorial School Corp., Danville Community School Corp., North Knox, Paramount School of Excellence Brookside, Paramount School of Excellence Cottage Home, Paramount School of Excellence Inglewood, Waunee, and Western Wayne. They have requested a number of statutes be waived. Again, all of them in front of you. I can walk through any one statute if board members have a question, or the recommendations, I guess, speak for themselves.
Any questions? Now will be the time for Dr. Hammock to speak.
Yep.
Welcome.
So Chad, these are some that you're making a change on, correct?
My recommendations are the recommendations. I think, based on conversations, I think that board members have questions about this particular set, but I'll let
Welcome. Good morning.
Hi, morning. How are you all?
Good. How are you?
I offer my sincere thanks to the members of the State Board of Education for your time today. My name is Dr. Laura Hammock, and I am the superintendent of Brown County Schools. Brown County Schools serves as the lead applicant for a consortium of school corporations and charter schools seeking to deploy flexibility from certain statutory requirements. This action is the direct result of House Enrolled Act 1003, legislation passed in the most recent session of the General Assembly. The purpose of my remarks today is to provide a deeper dive into the why behind this flexibility request. Since 1003 was passed, our Board of School Trustees and I have been intrigued by the potential for this legislation to expand opportunities and innovative practices for students. Too often, state-imposed regulations stymie efforts at the local level that seek to improve student performance and outcomes. Today's action maximizes local operations so that educational programming is more efficient, deploys innovative practices, and more strategically aligns the mission of each of our schools. As you can see, the consortium of districts represented in today's application represent rural, suburban, and urban communities in districts both large and small, and including charter schools. When compared, we are remarkably unique from each other. However, we do share a common focus towards improved student outcomes. Additionally, we share a growing frustration with ever-increasing regulations that distract from local governance. The tension between these two realities is where waiver flexibility shows up as a real solution for schools whose shared mission of positively impacting student achievement is aligned, while, and this can't be missed, individual solutions for realizing that outcome can be vastly unique. And herein lies the power of this waiver. I encourage board members not to think that education leaders requesting waivers from certain regulations are disregarding the goals behind the mandates. We seek waiver in this year of COVID for any statewide training requirement eligible for waiver. This action is not to disengage from what the mandates intend to address, but instead to have the freedom to identify at our local level how best to tackle the issues the law attempts to address. To that end, the ramifications from COVID-19 on K-12 educational institutions has informed one thing for certain: flexibility is the rule. We are deeply invested in response plans that meet the needs of ever-changing targets. In such an environment, operational flexibility through waiver helps address our needs and begs the question, if not now, when? As educators, we are well trained to develop strategies for intervention when our data informs the need. To illustrate, a troubling data point in Brown County is a recent tripling of the percentage rate of our students being served under CHINs. Mostly aligned with the substance use disorder epidemic in our community, students are showing up carrying significant trauma that impairs their ability to learn and thrive in the school environment. We knew our work needed to advance beyond standing regulations for required training of staff. Our district researched evidence-based practices for social-emotional learning and ultimately landed on 2 comprehensive curricula for deployment across our district. Through weekly lessons with daily classroom follow-up, we are beginning to move the needle on developing key skills to advance and improve mental health and wellness. Additionally, building-based crisis response teams receive instruction to lead site-based training in suicide prevention and crisis preparedness recovery. What is important about this illustration is that this work wasn't informed by regulation. Rather, it was inspired by a sincere localized need. One-size-fits-all regulations are often problematic in that their piecemeal approach, while always intended to positively affect outcomes, can result in missed opportunities, misperceptions, and unintended consequences. As such, in reflecting on other topics of training that have already been required for completion yet this school year, I am dismayed by having added more stress and time away from instruction during the most challenging work environment evidenced in my professional career. Quite simply, flexibility through the waiver process is needed now more than ever. Under the current environment, every day with our students is a gift, and we treasure each moment for student instruction. Please grant our request for waiver with the training mandates as recommended by the State Board of Education staff. Thank you for your consideration, and I would welcome any questions that you have.
Any questions by board members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
So BJ, as we go through this process, board recommendation for this, I have a problem with 3 of the areas that they're granting. I have a problem with bullying prevention, child suicide, and minimum training for police departments, for those trainings to be waived. I think right now the safety of our kids is even more heightened, and that the areas of minimal standards of training police departments as well as suicide training is very important for everyone to go through. So my recommendation would be to approve the staff recommendation with the amendment of denying 2026-5-342, denying 2026-5-34.4, and denying 2026-16.4.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there questions or comments by board members?
So can I put it a different way, just to make sure I'm clear?
Absolutely.
So the only thing that's being granted would be the annual performance report, the criminal gang measures. I don't know I think that was one that Pat did mention, and the school year.
Correct.
So those are the only ones granted, the rest would be denied.
That's my motion, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Pete?
Yeah.
Pete, then Byron, did you have something next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Mix, I certainly respect your opinion. I'm going to vote against the motion to amend the recommendation from the board. I mean, no one is saying that suicide prevention and these other items are not important. What we're saying is that these are non-academic things that we're asking schools to do, and I believe, I don't want to speak for the superintendent, but I think they're saying that they want to still address those in the way that makes sense for their district. And I think this can be a genesis for a larger discussion about those social service agency type of things that we just add one every year, right? It's just, it won't hurt for this one more thing to be tacked on. But then pretty soon you've got the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of these non-academic things. So again, I certainly understand that these things are important. That's my reason for voting against.
Well, and I think we ought to take a bigger look at this, Pete, and say these are things that everybody across the state can waive. Instead of just some of these individual things, there needs to be some kind of rotation instead of a yearly training, and even look down into the prep programs and have teachers who are going to prepare to get into the field do some of these trainings ahead of time as well, and then have refreshers.
I will agree with that.
But
Right.
we're not at that point yet, so
Right.
just dealing with what's in front of us.
Fair.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Byron?
Could we bring our superintendent back up on this, because she talked about this part of it, and I want to hear how you were informed and where you were on this. Because I lean toward some of the things that Pete was saying, but I want to hear, how did you get to those pieces, and how will that still be addressed?
Sure. I can speak specifically to Brown County's introduction and the way in which that our response has been deployed yet even this school year. Clearly, we are in unprecedented times where teacher stress is at a point that I have never experienced in my career. And as such, what we are truly intending to do with this work is to be much more intentional and efficient with the time that we have, knowing, right, that it could be tomorrow that our model could look different. Brown County has been very, very lucky. We have been in school since August the 5th, and we get the opportunity to go to school all day, every day. But that's through truly heroic efforts of folks, that's not me, right, that are doing incredible things on a daily basis. And so our motivation behind this work was truly to maximize the current environment to allow for the most time for teachers to be able to deliver instruction. Professional development is deeply important. We have created a model for the delivery of professional development that is embedded during the school day, but that can take time away from student instructional time. And what we're trying to do this year more than ever before, and in truly an intentional way for this year, is to ensure that the time that our teachers have for instruction is maximized. And so relief from some of the additional trainings this year would allow for us to focus with more intentionality. I gave you the story about our particular situation with mental health issues in our community for the fact that that's work that we cannot abandon. That's work that we are fundamentally focused on ensuring will be continued throughout this year and beyond, right? But it just allows for the local to be able to identify what is important to the local school district or school corporation or school itself, and then to deploy ultimately what is needed for that particular district's situation.
BJ, may I
Any other
ask?
questions?
So, one of the motions to waive the child suicide awareness and prevention, so, and you guys are talking about your mental health needs in your school corporation.
Right.
So is there a plan already in place that you're doing something differently than what is prescribed here?
Right. So currently, we are ensuring that our deployment is aligned with the law, right? So it is a fundamentally an embedded component of that SEL curriculum that we have deployed. We have a specific curriculum for K-8 and one that is also deployed for 9 through 12. So those are weekly lessons that are deployed to students that cover a variety of topics that ultimately are preventive efforts for the unfortunate and completely massively important topic of child suicide and prevention. And that's what the work is really focused on, is the fact that through these preventive efforts that are comprehensive in nature, that we are able to lift up the mental health of our students.
So you did training in suicide prevention,
Yes.
but you want a waiver for it?
So it happens that
Because
for
of the
Brown
group?
County, right,
Because of the group.
for our localized community, this was a deeply important thing for us. And so our mental health response has aligned.
But but we
Naturally.
don't know that for all of these, correct? I
correct.
understand that you're addressing them,
Sure.
and again, I appreciate, I work for the EVSC, I appreciate every request for
Of course.
the ability to take things off of our plate, but
Appreciate.
I would side with Pat that these three, and again, I know that you
Sure,
are
sure.
certainly addressing them, and sounds like addressing them fabulously. For me, I can't say that that's the case for all of the others, and your request is why but I'm glad that you are addressing them, and I love the freedom that you're going to get, but I can't support child suicide especially is really, really close to my heart, so I can't, and I know that it's to everyone on this thing, please don't, that probably came out wrong. I know that everyone values that's on your application. But I think there's a certain stance that we need to make sure that that's getting done. I know that you're doing it, but my lack of comfort comes from not knowing if every other district is doing it. Any other? Sorry, Katie?
Yes, I also just want to echo that the students are under tremendous amounts of additional stress as well. And, for that reason, again, it's wonderful, as you said, BJ, to hear from Dr. Hammock and the work that is happening in that district. I think we also have an obligation to make sure that students are receiving the same amount of support in these incredibly stressful and disruptive times. And so I, again, just want to reiterate that I support Dr. Mape's motion and believe that that's the best way for us to move forward at this time.
Thank you, Katie. Any other questions or comments by board members? Seeing none, we have a motion to approve as amended and a second. And the amendment would be removing the bullying, suicide prevention, and police training that Pat mentioned. So a yes vote would mean that you are voting to approve everything except those three. Roll call, please.
Really, though, I want to point out, that's not an amended motion. Correct. That was a motion. You see what I'm
The
saying?
motion to amend staff recommendation, I apologize.
Right. I just want to make that clear because this is an awkward situation, because if I vote no, then I'm voting against the ones that we are granting as well, right? I just want to point out the awkwardness of this.
And so procedurally,
Exactly. I guess I would have liked to have gone line by line. I didn't suggest that till now because I hadn't brought up the awkwardness. But I think it brings up an interesting thing for those that are watching what we are doing for Brown County and all those other schools, that if I vote no because I want to go with the staff recommendation here, then that looks different, correct?
Yeah, and so procedurally, if if this were to fail,
Byron, would you,
we could take them one by
I
one.
think there's an
Board's
easy fix
discretion.
here. We can ask Pat to repeal his motion, and we can go line by
Withdraw it.
line. I mean, we haven't voted yet, so certainly if you would prefer that.
Personally, I would feel more comfortable with that if there would be
That's fine.
others that, I don't want to be a pain, but I think it's, if we're going to be truly public about this, the public deserves to know where we stand on each item, and they're not going to know this by the way this is presented, in my opinion.
So, Pat, are you okay with repealing your motion?
Yeah, that's fine. You can do
And
them
I
line by
don't know
line.
who was the second? I apologize. I don't
It was
know.
Ms.
Katie?
Moat.
And Katie, you're repealing your second?
Yes, I am.
All right, so it'll be
So we
withdrawn.
will go line by line item vote on number 2 for the joint submission. Would you,
Line by
will you
line,
just
so-
read each one and then
Yeah,
do roll call
absolutely.
for each one?
So to clarify, line by line on each one of the statutes that they've requested be waived.
Yes.
That's what you would like. Okay, so with respect to,
Byron, is that good?
Code by code.
Yes, yes.
okay,
Code by code.
sure. You have to bear with me here because I'm working with vote sheets that I did not anticipate this, so it may take me a second to organize this.
Can I real quick?
No, it's all right, it's all right. So
Denied of your memo.
with respect to Brown County's joint submission on behalf of all 9 school corporations, the first statute eligible is IC 2019-9-1, and that is the definition of a virtual education program. As a reminder, the staff recommendation was that that be denied.
So are we voting to support the staff recommendation?
That would be,
Well, it depends on the
that
motion, I
would be the
suppose.
motion.
Right, okay.
I'll make the motion that we
But you can do it.
follow the staff recommendation to deny this individual request for virtual education.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
So, Ms. DeLissa,
Yes.
Mr. Durham,
Yes.
Dr. Ernest,
Yes.
Dr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau,
Yes.
Mr. Mapes,
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Ms. Moat,
Yes.
Ms. Rentschler,
Yes.
Mr. Watts.
Yes.
Staff recommendation passes 11-0. The second statute in question here is IC 20-19-9-4. That is titled Establishment of Virtual Education School. The staff recommendation was to deny.
BJ, I'll move that we follow the staff recommendation to deny the individual request for establishment of virtual education schools.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Ms. DeLissa,
Yes.
Mr. Durham,
Yes.
Dr. Ernest,
Yes.
Dr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau,
Yes.
Mr. Mapes,
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Ms. Moat,
Yes.
Ms. Rentschler,
Yes.
Mr. Watts.
Yes.
Staff recommendation is approved 11-0. Third statute up for question is IC 20-28-8, and that is School Corporation Annual Performance Report. The staff recommendation was that this be granted.
Move to approve staff recommendation.
We have a motion. We have a second, please.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Ms. DeLissa,
Yes.
Mr. Durham,
Yes.
Dr. Ernest,
Yes.
Dr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau,
Yes.
Mr. Mapes,
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Ms. Moat,
Yes.
Ms. Rentschler,
Yes.
Mr. Watts.
Yes.
Staff recommendation is approved 11-0. The next is IC 20-26-5-34.2, bullying prevention training. The staff recommendation was that this be granted.
Move to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
So this is that the staff recommendation be be approved, which is to grant the waiver.
So a vote for this would be the opposite of what Pat just requested.
Correct. A vote in favor of this would be to grant the waiver with respect to bullying prevention training.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Ms. DeLissa,
No.
Mr. Durham,
No.
Dr. Ernest,
Yes.
Dr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau,
No.
Mr. Mapes,
No.
Superintendent McCormick,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Ms. Moat,
No.
Ms. Rentschler?
No.
Mr. Watts?
No.
Motion fails.
So do we need a motion to deny then?
Yes.
So is there a motion to deny staff recommendation?
Well, wouldn't it?
Do we need to take a second vote is my question, since there was,
Why?
Why wouldn't?
No, we can
Done.
do the
Good on
reverse.
that.
So the waiver will be, with respect to that particular statute, will be denied.
okay, perfect.
Next statute in question is IC 20-26-5-34.4, Child Suicide Awareness Prevention Policy. The staff recommendation was that the waiver be granted.
Move to approve staff recommendation.
Second?
Roll
Roll
call.
call?
Ms. DeLosa?
No.
Mr. Durham?
No.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Mapes?
No.
Superintendent McCormick?
No.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Moat?
No.
Ms. Rentschler?
No.
Mr. Watts?
No.
The waiver will be denied with respect to that statute. The next is IC 20-26-16-4, School Corporation Police Department's minimum training requirements. Staff recommendation was that that waiver be granted.
Move to approve.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Ms. DeLosa?
No.
Mr. Durham?
No.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
No.
Mr. Mapes?
No.
Superintendent McCormick?
No.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Moat?
No.
Ms. Rentschler?
No.
Mr. Watts?
No.
That waiver will be denied. The next is IC 20-26-18, criminal gang measures. Staff recommendation was that the waiver be granted.
Move to approve staff recommendation.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Ms. DeLosa?
Yes.
Mr. Durham?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Mapes?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Moat?
Yes.
Ms. Rentschler?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Waiver is approved for that statute. Next is IC 20-30-2-3, school year. Board staff recommendation that it was to be granted.
Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Ms. DeLosa?
Yes.
Mr. Durham?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yep.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Mapes?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
No.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Moat?
Yes.
Ms. Rentschler?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Granted, 10-1. And the final is IC 20-33-2-3.2, the definition of to attend. Board staff recommendation was that that be denied.
I'll move that we follow board recommendation to deny the attendance requirement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Ms. DeLosa?
Yes.
Mr. Durham?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Mapes?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Moat?
Yes.
Ms. Rentschler?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
That will be denied. And that wraps up that particular waiver request by Brown County Schools on behalf of Consortium of 9.
On to number 3.
On to number 3 is Boago County Schools. They have requested 2 statutes be waived. The first is IC 20-30-2-2, That's Student Instructional Day. The second is IC 20-30-2, and that is the school year. In both instances, the board staff's recommendation was that the waiver requests with respect to those statutes be denied. So happy to take them separately again if that's what the board prefers.
Is there, this is not new from above, though, correct?
We can take, no, these are not new.
There is a bullying one in this.
We can take them separately.
I'm saying there is a bullying one that's part of this one that not everyone supports.
There should not be a bullying one as part of WAGO.
I'm sorry. I was ahead of myself.
Their request was limited to just those two statutes I mentioned. So it's student instructional days and school year.
Is there a motion to approve?
And again,
Chad, would you recommend that we do these all individuals? We did the last one, but we didn't do the first one, so.
that's completely up to the board. In this instance, the board staff recommendation is the same with respect to both statutes.
I feel like we've
to
set
deny
precedent
both.
with the three that
We can go separate.
We are going to support and not support, so I don't see a need unless you do.
I'll make a motion
But I'm not the
to,
attorney.
as a whole, to approve the
As a
staff
whole,
recommendation on WAGO.
So the motion is to approve staff recommendation as a whole. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
I have a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
So I understand the Brown County was wanting to count instructional, or the Brown County group was wanting to count instructional hours versus the days.
Correct.
I understand that.
Yep.
This, they're wanting to count instructional hours as well, but get down to 4 days a week instead of 5.
That was not how I read it. I read it as a blanket waiver, which would then allow them to go to 4 days a week if they so chose.
It says it seeks to track the school year in instructional hours rather than days, just like the Brown County group. But they're going to do so in a manner that's going to get them down to 4 days versus 5, which I will tell you, the Brown County group could get there really quickly too. I mean, we got a lot of districts that are way over in hours. So I want to make sure the consistency
Yeah,
here.
absolutely.
Like they could do exactly what you're denying Vago to do.
So if you, and it could be the case that I overlooked the fact that they've asked to count instructional hours. Just give me 1 second.
And I'm only reading this, honestly, I don't have the application in front of me,
Sure.
so you may be right.
So they have asked for a blanket waiver in order to ignore the instructional time requirements of 1 day a week. It is not count, I don't see in their application where it's counting hours like the Brown County application suggested, where they would provide the same amount of instructional time measured in hours instead of days.
So they're not tracking hours? They
Correct.
just want to cut
Correct.
off
They just want a
days.
blanket waiver so they can cut
Did you
time
ask
off.
them?
I have not spoken with them since they submitted their waiver, no.
Okay. I just think those are so very, very close.
And I can go back and
That's what I'm
clarify,
just
and we can bring
asking.
it back. I mean, that's certainly up to the board, but in this instance, yes, the distinguishing factor was
Let me ask you
counting
this,
hours.
if we take action and they say, no, we misstated that in our application, we actually meant what Dr. McCormick said, can they bring it back to us, or is there a time frame, or should we?
They can
hold-
always bring it back, yeah. Yeah,
The question is, should
will
we
be
hold
flexible.
this, since there's a little bit of confusion, or should we take action? I'm saying they could bring it back next month if they, I don't want them to be out for a certain time period if we take action.
That's correct. Good.
So I guess from a staff perspective, we would recommend taking action so that, this is the first time the board's looked at this, so that we have some parameters where schools get an idea of maybe where the board is headed on some of these things.
And if they say
And
we
they can
didn't,
come back and
we
they
didn't
say-
explain that the way maybe that we
Because-
should have,
because
this is what we meant, they can come back next month.
It could be one of two ways. This is exactly what they wanted, right? And then they
Yeah,
don't come back.
absolutely.
Or it could be, it's what they wanted, but they may say, the board's not going to go for that. We'll go for the minutes. We'll try to count the minutes.
Okay.
And they can come back.
Perfect.
And when I send them the notice, I will make that clear to them. If that's the direction the board would like to go, I will make that clear to them that option is available and would be acceptable, so
Okay.
that way
We're
they
going
know.
to table this, or we're going
I think we're going to vote,
Okay.
and then if they want to change it and amend it to what has been approved, then they can bring that back to us. Any other questions by board members? So the motion is to approve staff recommendation as a whole. Roll call, please.
Ms. DeLosa?
Yes.
Mr. Durham?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
Yes.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
Yes.
Mr. Mapes?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Moat?
Yes.
Ms. Rentschler?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
So recommendation is approved 11-0. And again, when I reach out to that school corporation, I will inform them of their options.
Okay, thank you. Number 4.
Number
We have a
4
joint
is
submission.
a joint submission submitted by Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation on behalf of itself and Beech Grove City Schools. This submission is identical to the submission Brown County submitted with one caveat. They've also requested, in addition to everything that Brown County requested, they have requested that that IC 20-20-40-13, which is Restraint and Seclusion Commission duties, rules, notice requirements, training, and elements of plan be waived. The staff recommendation is to deny that, as it's not applicable to school corporations in and of themselves. That's actually a statute that's only applicable to the Restraint and Seclusion Commission. So,
Do we feel like we've set precedent, or do we feel like we need to vote on these individually as well? Is there a purpose?
I do have a question.
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So on the Bartholomew on our memo, it says it's for Brown, but that's just a typo, correct?
That is a
This
typo,
for
yes, I
Bartholomew
apologize.
Beach Road.
Yep.
So when the staff did your homework on this, as far as the schools that under Brown County that asked for forgiveness in the gang, when you did your homework on Beech Grove, did that look any different? So that the board's educated, like.
With respect to
the gang activity in Brown County and, I have to go back and look, sorry. Danville, Knightstown, North Knox, Wani, Western Wayne, all your Paramount.
We did not look into gang activity in those.
So that didn't play into your decision for waiver or not waiver?
No,
That's
again,
what I'm asking.
no, yeah, in this instance, the general position we took was to be overly broad with recommending that things be granted. And that's, like I said, because the waivers are new in and of themselves, but also because the school corporations had to bring this in front of their school boards. And so school boards, part of the assumption here was that school boards had those conversations and decided that at the local level, that was something that they were willing to waive. And so, yeah, but going forward, now that we've had these conversations, that's certainly something we can do more research into, absolutely.
So obviously, I have a problem with waiving the suicide, the police training, and the bullying training on this one as well.
Is that a motion, Pat?
I guess the question becomes, are we going to take this one line by line?
Do
or
we feel like we've set precedent? I feel like we've set precedent with what we're going to approve and not approve, so I think we can do this one as a whole.
Okay. So then my motion would be to deny the suicide prevention, the police department, and the bullying recommendations, and approve the rest of them.
So approve staff recommendation omitting bullying, suicide, and police.
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions by board members? Roll call, please.
Ms. DeLosa?
Yes.
Mr. Durham?
Yes.
Dr. Ernest?
No.
Dr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau?
No.
Mr. Mapes?
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick?
No, and I would like to explain my vote that is because of simply bullying. The other two, I think, need to go. So there was just one of those three, so it gets a little confusing.
We'll note that in the minutes. Mr. Miller?
No.
Ms. Moat?
Yes.
Ms. Rentschler?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
So the motion was approved 7-4.
Okay. And lastly?
And
we
the
have
final waiver in
Switzerland
front of the
County.
board,
Sorry.
yeah, so it comes from Switzerland County School Corporation. They've requested two statutes be waived, IC 20-30-2-1, which is instructional time, IC 20-30-2-2, which is student instructional day. The staff recommendation is that the waiver be denied with respect to instructional time, but granted with respect to student instructional days. The distinguishing factor here is that Switzerland has requested to waive the school instructional day requirement for the limited purpose of providing 4 half-days. Or 2-hour delays, I apologize. Four 2-hour delays over the course of the school year, while still being able to count those as instructional days.
And we are saying we're going to deny that?
It was to grant that.
Was, okay. So staff recommendation is to grant this.
We can take the two separate, if that's what the board prefers, or?
You made a motion to
Well, I don't make
approve,
motions.
well, I'm saying, you make a recommendation.
My recommendation was to deny the request with respect to instructional time, because it's just a definitional code site, and then to grant the waiver with respect to a student instructional day for the limited purpose of allowing them to conduct 4 2-hour delays over the course of the school year.
And have you conveyed to them the recommendation denial, or when you do, can you clarify if there's additional, if there is an option they could pursue?
So in this instance, they're going to, if the staff recommendation is approved, they're going to get what they want. It's just that we're not going to waive definitions. That way we can keep definitions applicable statewide and limit what the board is willing to waive to operative provisions in the statute.
Is there a motion to approve staff recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Ms. DeLosa,
Yes.
Mr. Durham,
Yes.
Dr. Ernest,
Yes.
Dr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau,
Yes.
Mr. Mapes,
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Ms. Moat,
Yes.
Ms. Runchler,
Yes.
Mr. Watts.
Yes.
Staff recommendations approved 11-0. And I believe that wraps up the 1003 waivers. Thank you for
Thank you, sir.
bearing with us through that process.
Before you
On the
walk
new waiver.
away,
Yes,
can
ma'am.
I ask you a question?
Yes,
So the ones that were approved and denied, so that school corporations don't waste their time, is there a possible way that we could communicate out those that were approved and those that were denied to signal to districts and to school boards and to administrators more of where to begin? Because I
Yeah.
think I just don't want to waste their time, and during this, especially during a pandemic, they don't have the time to waste.
Yep.
So how can it be communicated, and how would it be communicated?
So I suppose we can find a way to work with your staff and have it put out in Pam's and Sam's if there's an efficient way we can manage that. I think that would be the simplest way to get it out there. It will eventually end up each year in annual reports as well, and then guidance put out by board staff. Like I said, hopefully here within the next month. So, but I think Pam's and Sam's is the easiest way to get it out quickly in the short term. And I will follow up with your staff, Dr. McCormick,
Thank you.
in order to make that happen.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
All right. I think I've got one more on action for the board.
Transfer tuition?
Yep, transfer tuition. So in this instance, it's a proposed default order in cause number 07-07-2020, finding Indianapolis Public Schools to be in default with respect to this cause number. Upon the board's approval, that will be sent out to all of the parties.
Any questions? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any roll call, please?
Ms. DeLosa,
Yes.
Mr. Durham,
Yes.
Dr. Ernest,
Yes.
Dr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Gastineau,
Yes.
Mr. Mapes,
Yes.
Superintendent McCormick,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Ms. Moat,
Yes.
Ms. Rensselaer,
Yes.
and Mr. Watts.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay. I believe we're up to the presentation of homeless and foster youth report from IYI. Did I take it? Okay.
Good morning. My name is Maggie Stevens, and I'm here this morning as the CEO and president of Foster Success, a nonprofit supporting Indiana's 22,000 teens and young adults who have experienced foster care, along with my colleague Sally Binley from School on Wheels and Alicia Kilmovich of the Indiana Youth Institute. We're here this morning to discuss with you the educational outcomes of Indiana students in foster care and Indiana students who've experienced homelessness while in school. In the spring of 2018, Foster Success pushed forward legislation that became House Enrolled Act 1314, requiring the Indiana Department of Child Services and the Indiana Department of Education to work together to submit an annual report on the education outcomes of young Hoosiers in foster care and experiencing homelessness. Earlier this year, each of these reports were submitted to you. I believe you received in May, you received the foster care education outcomes report, and in June, the homeless youth education outcomes report. Since that time, Foster Success, along with our partners at IYI and School on Wheels, have worked together to better understand the data and dig a little bit deeper, and we've each invested our own resources to make that happen. So on your tables, you have a copy of summary reports that were put together once we started looking at the data at the county and the school corporation level. Additionally, we looked at in-group comparison data for students of various races, ethnic groups, genders, English as a second language learners, special education, etc. My hope going into that was that as we looked at this data at the disaggregated level, at the local level, that we would start to see examples of where our students were shining and find ways to amplify those stories to you and to others in the state. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for either the foster care students or the homeless students. The data showed us that gaps in educational outcomes for Indiana students and foster care and those experiencing homelessness persist and are present statewide, regardless of the student's age, race, gender, ethnicity, or location. Since you have the reports in front of you, and there is supplemental longer reports, about 30 pages each, to go along with each of the summary documents you have, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going into detail about the individual outcomes, but I do want to give each of you a better idea of who these young students are. Collectively, our foster care and homeless students represent 2 to 3% at a minimum of our school-age students in the state. They're concentrated in specific school corporations and counties. About 50% of our foster care students are educated in 10 counties, and about half of the homeless youth are educated in 7 counties. Across both groups, we find that this population is disproportionately Black or African American and disproportionately enrolled in special education curriculum. Additionally, when compared to the general student population, students in each group are more likely to be retained in grade, suspended, or expelled. They are less likely to graduate, and of those who graduate, they are more likely to graduate with a waiver. When speaking specifically about the foster care population, I can tell you that we are pleased that the data matching processes between IDOE and DCS this past year significantly improved from the first year, matching educational records for nearly twice as many students in the 2020 report as we were able to see in the 2019 report. However, that larger data set only showed us more dismal outcomes. A year ago, it was reported that 65% of our students in foster care graduated from high school. Once we were able to have a more accurate reporting and accounting of our students, we saw that only 55% of our students in foster care graduated from high school this past year. And 36% of those who graduated, nearly 3 times as many as their non-foster care peers, graduated with a waiver. The improvement in data matching and identifications of students is promising, but there's obviously more we need to do. Again, suggestions for supporting these students are outlined in their respective reports, but this morning I want to focus on one that crosses both populations, and that's related to the identification of who these students are in our buildings. Identifications of these students is challenging for both populations for different reasons. For students in foster care in particular, we have to do a better job ensuring that schools know that a student in their building is in foster care within 24 hours of placement and or upon immediate enrollment in a new school. This doesn't mean that every educational record has to be in the building that quickly, although it needs to follow close behind. There has to be notification so that administrators and teachers know that when that child walks into the building, they know what he or she is carrying with him or her into the classroom. The state has the data. We need to work to build better systems to get the data to our schools. For homeless youth, the identification is challenging in different ways. While there are definitions of homelessness, your average family, or even a high school student who happens to be couch surfing, likely does not know the many living situations that may categorize them as homeless. Then, if they do recognize themselves as experiencing homelessness, we have to wonder if they know who to tell about this and whether they will tell someone about this. For some families, there's fear that their kids will enter the foster care system if they make their situation known and ask for additional help. For others, it's past failures from the system that is supposed to support them that keeps them from reaching out. And yet others just simply don't know where or who to turn to. Once we know who the students in foster care are, once we know who the students who are experiencing homelessness are, then we can work to increase support, address the disciplinary disparities, allow their voices to be heard as we educate them, and in turn, improve the academic experiences and outcomes for the nearly 30,000 individuals identified in these subgroups. Finally, while House Enrolled Act 1314 has helped us to better understand the experiences of our students, there are still many pieces missing to their story. So we are asking that not only do we continue to follow the outcomes of our students as previously required, but we also ask that you have DCS, IDOE, and other state agencies work more closely together to include additional data points about these students in the future. You can see some of those listed on the slide, but looking at their attendance, their school mobility, their dropout rates, going as far as looking at students who are completing HSEs, high school equivalencies at some point in time. If we can build the data sharing system that allows us to track these things, we'll have an even greater understanding of where the barriers are for these students. Additionally, I would like to encourage this group to look at ways that DCS can better access the information about the educational performance of their students. While the legislation did require that IDOE and DCS share information to identify and report at an aggregate level on the outcomes of those students, there continue to be barriers for caseworkers to access individualized data on their students' educational performance. And we need this information in real time to make real-time change. So there's a lot of information in each of those reports, and I'm sure there's pieces you'd like to better understand. I'm going to pause, let my colleagues jump in, and then we're happy to answer any of your questions.
Good morning. I'm Sally Bentley, the founder and CEO of School on Wheels, and I want to let you know the data that you have in front of you, first and foremost, was collected pre-COVID. So all of this was for the prior school year. What we know right now is that when we are on the other side of this pandemic, we're going to have an increase in unemployment. When the eviction moratorium is over, we'll have increase in evictions, hunger, health issues. All of those things are going to lead to a drastic increase in the homeless and foster youth populations. So with the data that we have in front of us now, it's important for us to understand the data. It's important for us to understand the student outcomes so that we can act on some of these priorities and better assist the higher numbers of kids that we're going to see at the end of this pandemic. School on Wheels was lucky to work with both of these organizations. For 19 years, we have been providing one-on-one tutoring, wraparound academic support services, and parent support for homeless students, K through 12. We know to end poverty and homelessness, kids need two things in their lives: sound education and caring adult. School on Wheels provides those things. Pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, it doesn't matter what is happening. Our focus is on helping kids learn in school, stay in school, and helping parents advocate for their children's needs. Sometimes that means we're in parking lots, like right now. We're tutoring in parking lots outside of the hotels where our families are living. And just yesterday, I was talking to one of our staff members, and I asked her how her week was going, and she said, "It's good, but cold." So she's outside all day long helping kids with their remote learning, offering extra tutoring, and she had 6 families who came up to her at the end of the day yesterday and asked, "Hey, can you help my kid too?" So I think the report again, like Maggie said, we really wanted to present some really fine things that are shining on these two populations and how our kids are excelling. But the data just isn't there. It's kind of clear that the student outcomes are tied to housing situation, and we really need to do a better job. At School on Wheels, our job is to make sure that our student academic outcomes are tied to their ability, not their mobility. There's a lot of data in front of you. We really think identification is key. The more kids we know about, the better we are to assist them. And we think there needs to be a better allocation of resources. So 1/3 of the homeless kids in the state live in 2 counties. And we want to distribute the financial and human resources appropriately in the highest density areas. So Marion County has the highest number of homeless youth. Allen County is second. So we want to look at where are we sending our people to help these kids? Where are we sending our funds to help these kids? And if 1/3 of them are in those 2 counties, we think the resources need to be distributed more equitably. I can have Alicia weigh in on some of the other fine points in the data and white papers.
If the board has any questions, we're happy to answer, but I think my colleagues provided a great overview. It's also good to see familiar faces.
Any questions by board members? Trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Lastly, we have 8F accountability update.
We'll be quick here. Wanted to give the board an update as well as the public. It's been a few months since we discussed this ongoing item. We've been working internally since the last time I presented to the board, conducting research and analysis, organizing and summarizing the feedback that we got across more than 50 stakeholders in multiple meetings. And then we've also kind of solidified a timeline here for next steps. So wanted to highlight those to give you all clear expectations as well as the field and share some exciting opportunities. So by the November board meeting, we hope to release the draft accountability framework. Again, the framework is a starting point for the board to then draft an initial administrative rule. This is not a recommended accountability model, and it's not a recommended accountability rule. It is truly a summary of expert input and community input from across the state, so that the board is starting with a strong foundation and translating that into an administrative rule. Once that's released publicly, we will do our best to publicize that, get it out through associations, other mediums of communication, through different specific affinity groups, if you will. And we hope to host some panel discussions, and I just want to quickly share the thought process behind that. COVID has created unique situations. We would have much rather liked to have a public hearing in person, potentially multiple public hearings. Again, there'll be public hearings for the rulemaking process, but this is all generating the initial foundation. That wasn't really possible. Folks aren't comfortable with that yet. Really, no matter where we are over the next month, I don't think enough people are going to be comfortable to execute that option. The other option traditionally would have been a webinar, where someone speaks into a microphone into the ether, and you hope someone is on the other side listening, which at that point you might as well record it and post it online. So we're trying to do a hybrid, where we create an interactive environment, but a controlled interactive environment, where we work with our associations across the state who have been involved in the process up until this point, to identify some folks to participate in small group panel discussions, but that will be streamed live and recorded as well. We will not only solicit the input from those panel discussions, there'll also be an opportunity for folks who are listening in to submit their feedback online. This will allow us to ensure that we're getting the type of feedback that we're hoping to get on the accountability framework, but also leave it open-ended in case folks have additional ideas or other ideas. Those are tentatively scheduled for November, and our goal is that once that's publicly released, folks will have a chance to get their eyes on it. We will work with the panelists to support them, to make sure that they're comfortable, no one comes into that conversation blind. And then facilitate a short discussion where folks get to be candid, share their thoughts on the proposals that are in the framework, identify shortcomings, identify strengths, and then potentially share additional considerations before we then make revisions, bring back a final framework in December, again, which will serve as a foundational starting point for the board to then draft an initial administrative rule. I can't stress that enough. This will not be a proposed accountability model. This will be a framework of ideas, research, input that then you all will work together to kind of piecemeal and create, not piecemeal, excuse me, strategically pull out an accountability rule.
Any questions by board members? Just job well done. I know that you are bringing a lot of different folks to the table, and I know that they appreciate being at the table on the front end of this, which I think will certainly produce fruit on the back end of it. So
appreciate that.
Good job, Ron. Anything else for the good of the cause?
Vote to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Yeah, absolutely, brother.